My fiancé told me I had to choose between him and my family, so I chose myself. On the day of my bridal shower, my 10-year-old cousin came out of my home office holding a stack of printer paper and a very confused expression. She said, is this part of the party? On top of the stack, in black and white, was an email from my fiancé to his mother that said, "Once we're married, I'll make sure she cuts them off. She'll thank me later." My cousin frowned and asked, "Why does it say you have to get away from your family?" I didn't shout. I didn't storm into the living room and throw the cake. I made one small change. I quietly slid that email into my planner, sat through my own shower with a fake smile, and decided that before I married anyone, I was going to find out who was actually trying to protect me and who just wanted me isolated. I had no idea that a few weeks later, my fiancé would look me in the eye and say, "You have to choose, me or them." And that I would look back and, for the first time in my life, choose neither of them. My name is Nina. I'm 29 years old, and I live in New Jersey, about 30 minutes outside New York City. I'm a first-generation American. My parents came here from India in their 20s. I grew up in that tug of war a lot of immigrant kids know too well. At home, family first, respect your elders, don't talk back. Outside, be independent. Set boundaries. Cut off anyone who's toxic. For most of my 20s, I tried to do both. It went about how you'd expect. Badly. My parents aren't evil, but they are. Controlling. Critical. And experts at the guilt trip. Comments like, "We gave up everything for you, and this is how you repay us?" Other daughters call their mothers every day, "You're too busy for 5 minutes?" Love and obligation were so tangled in my house that I couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. So when I met Daniel, it felt refreshing. He was 31, white, grew up in the Midwest with what he called a chill family. He thought my stories about my parents' expectations were wild. "You're an adult," he'd say. "You don't owe them your whole life." We met at work. I'm in marketing, he's in IT. We started as friends who complained about the coffee, then about our bosses, then about everything else. He listened when I vented about my mom calling 5 times in one day. He saw how my dad's disapproving silence could ruin my mood for hours. He'd say things like, "You don't deserve that. You don't have to let them talk to you like that. You're allowed to have your own life." For a long time, it felt like he was the only one in my corner. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. It wasn't a surprise we'd talked about marriage a lot, but the way he did it was, he took me to the boardwalk where we had our first unofficial date. There were string lights, a food truck, taco dinner, and a ring that made my hands shake when I saw it. After I said yes, he held me and whispered, "We're going to build something new, just you and me. You won't have to feel like a bad daughter anymore." That line should have made me pause. Instead, it made me cry with relief. Because I did feel like a bad daughter most of the time. Bad for wanting space. Bad for wanting therapy. Bad for not wanting to spend every Sunday at my parents' house listening to the same arguments. When we told my parents we were engaged, my mom cried for a different reason. For context, Daniel is not Indian. My parents had always said they were okay with whoever you choose, as long as they respect our culture. In practice, that meant they wanted an Indian son-in-law. "So," my mom said, dabbing her eyes, "you're really not going to marry a nice Indian boy?" I laughed weakly. "Mom, I'm literally bringing you the man I'm going to marry, and the first thing you say is, 'But what about theoretical Indian men?'" She huffed. "I'm happy for you," she said. "I'm just worried. Will he understand our ways? Will he respect us?" Daniel squeezed my hand under the table. "I want to," he said sincerely. "I know I'll make mistakes, but I care about Nina, so I care about where she comes from." My dad was quieter, but his displeasure leaked out in other ways. Jokes like, "At least we don't have to go to India to find in-laws now. We can just drive across the river." Comments like, "In our community, children don't put themselves before their families like this." I felt like I was being tugged between two narratives. My parents, "You're betraying your culture." Daniel, "They're toxic. You need to get away." Somewhere in there, my voice got very, very small. Fast forward to my bridal shower. My mom insisted on throwing it at my apartment, a compromise between her house or nothing, and my need to not have every auntie from 3 different temples in my living room. Daniel was out with his friends. "No guys allowed," my mom said, then immediately made an exception for my dad, who sat in the corner scrolling his phone and grunting at anyone who tried to engage him. There were games, there were samosas, there was a mountain of gifts my mother loudly complained were too much, and then quietly rearranged to be Instagrammable. At one point, my little cousin Anya disappeared into my office to draw me a special card. 10 minutes later, she came back out with that stack of paper. "Printer went crazy," she said. "It started spitting these out." On top, subject line, Nina and her parents. From Daniel. Duh? Mom, once we're married, I'll make sure she cuts them off. She'll thank me later. It might take a year or 2 to fully separate her because of the culture thing and the guilt, but I'm patient. We just have to get her to move further away, get her used to independent holidays, and not let her family pull her back in. She keeps saying she feels torn. Once it's just us, she won't. My mouth went dry. Underneath that, if she hesitates, I'll remind her how bad they've made her feel. She trusts me. Don't worry, Mom, I've got this. I felt like the air had been punched out of my lungs. Is that bad? Anya asked, peering at my face. I forced my features into something like neutral. It's grown-up stuff, I said. Thanks for bringing it to me. Let's keep this between us for now, okay? No need to show anyone else. She nodded, already distracted by the promise of cake. I slid the email to the bottom of the stack, folded the whole thing in half, and tucked it into my planner in the drawer. Then I plastered on a smile and went back to opening presents. Every time my mom fussed over me, I heard, "Once we're married, I'll make sure she cuts them off." Every time my aunt said, "Family is everything," I heard, "We just have to get her to move further away." Every time my dad's face tightened at some bridal game he thought was too American, I heard, "I'll remind her how bad they've made her feel." And to one, by the time the last guest left, my cheeks hurt from fake laughing. My mom kissed me on both cheeks and said, "You did well. You didn't embarrass us. That's all we can ask." When the door closed behind my parents, I leaned against it and slid down to the floor. I had always thought of Daniel as my escape hatch. Now, for the first time, I wondered what I was actually escaping into. That night, when Daniel came home, he was still buzzing from his own guy shower. "How was it?" he asked, dropping a bag of leftover wings on the counter. "Any toilet paper, dress disasters?" "It was fine," I said, voice flat. He noticed. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Did your mom say something?" That would have been the easy out. Blame it on my mom. We'd done that dance before. Instead, I said, "We need to talk about an email." His shoulders stiffened. "What email?" he asked carefully. "The one you sent your mom," I said, "about making sure I cut my parents off once we're married." Color drained from his face. "How did you—" He started, then stopped. "Did you go through my email?" I almost laughed. "No," I said. "The printer did." I explained briefly about Anya, about the office printer deciding to spit out his Gmail like a slot machine. He ran a hand through his hair. "Damn it," he muttered. "I thought I logged out." That wasn't the reassurance he thought it was. "Can you explain this?" I asked, pulling the folded pages from my planner and sliding them across the counter. He read them, jaw tightening, then put them down. "I shouldn't have written it like that," he said finally. "That's not an explanation," I said. "That's an almost apology for tone." He sighed. "Okay," he said. "Look, you've told me 100 times how awful your parents make you feel, how they guilt you, how they don't respect boundaries. You cry after you see them. You vent to me about how trapped you feel. I wanted to help you get out of that." "By making sure I cut them off?" I asked. "By planning to move me further away without telling me that was your strategy?" He frowned. "I wasn't going to drag you across the country against your will," he said. "I was just being proactive. You struggle to say no to them. I thought, if we set up our life in a way that naturally created distance, it would be easier for you." "That's a decision we should make together," I said, "not something you map out with your mom behind my back." He bristled. "My mom is one of the few people in my life whose judgment I trust," he said. "I was asking her for advice about how to separate me from my family without me fully realizing it." I shot back. "Do you hear how that sounds?" He rubbed his forehead. "You're twisting it," he said. "I'm trying to protect you from people who hurt you." "My parents have issues," I said. "I won't deny that, but they're still my parents. I get to decide what relationship I have with them. You don't get to decide for me." We went back and forth like that for an hour. I said things like, "I want boundaries, not a secret extraction plan. You're talking about me like a project, not a partner." He said things like, "You're addicted to the drama with them. If you loved yourself, you'd want out. If you loved me, you'd trust me to lead on this." That last line snagged on something in me. "If I loved you, I'd let you cut me off from my family?" I repeated. "That's what you're saying?" "I'm saying if you loved me and wanted a healthy life with me," he said, "you wouldn't keep clinging to people who clearly don't have your best interests at heart." We ended the night in a weird stalemate. He went to bed early, frustrated. I stayed up late, scrolling through old text threads with my mom and with him. On one screen, "Mom, you never visit. Maybe you don't see us as real parents because we're not American enough. Mom, after everything we did for you in this country, you treat us like a burden." On the other, "Daniel, you deserve better than them. Daniel, they're holding you back. Daniel, imagine how peaceful life will be when it's just us, no more guilt trips." From one side, guilt. From the other, rescue narrative. In both, I was more object than person. Something to be clung to or saved, not someone whose own feelings and choices were the center of the conversation. The next day, my mom called. "How was the shower?" she asked, as if she hadn't been there orchestrating every second. "Fine," I said. "Tiring." "You looked thin," she said. "Are you eating? Wedding stress is not an excuse to stop taking care of yourself." I opened my mouth to say, "We need to talk about expectations after I get married." Instead, I said, "I'm fine, Mom," because conflict with her felt like drowning. Conflict with Daniel, by contrast, felt like standing on a cliff edge. Neither felt like solid ground. I told myself I could figure it out after the wedding. That was the lie that almost cost me my peace. End of part 2, cliffhanger. We see both sides are problematic. Nina hasn't decided yet, wedding is still on. Audience wants to see how this escalates to the ultimatum. Part 3. The ultimatum. 2 weeks before the wedding, everything cracked. It started with something small, like these big things always do. My parents wanted a second ceremony. We had planned a simple, non-religious ceremony at a venue in the city neutral, us branded. My mom, however, wanted a traditional religious blessing at their temple. Just a small thing, she said. Our priest, some family, simple clothes. It would mean so much. When I brought it up to Daniel, he grimaced. I thought we agreed on one ceremony, he said. Ours. This would be more for them than for us, I said. It doesn't have to be a big production. I'm not comfortable standing in front of someone who thinks I'm already a bad match for you, he said. Your mom literally told you she wished you'd found an Indian guy. She also cried when we got engaged, I said. Feelings can be more than one thing. He shook his head. I'm not doing it, he said. If we say yes to this, what's next? Moving in with them when they get old? Naming our kids after whoever your mom picks? That last part was unfair. My parents had never asked to move in. But the fear behind it was real, that my family's gravity would pull us into their orbit. The argument spiraled from one extra ceremony to the entire shape of our marriage in under 15 minutes. At one point I said, you act like my parents are villains in a movie. They're flawed, but they're also the reason I exist. They're the reason I even got to be here to meet you. He snapped back. Your gratitude is going to be the death of you. We didn't talk for the rest of the night. The next morning he came into the kitchen with a look on his face I'd never seen before. Calm, resolved, a little cold. We need to settle this, he said. Okay, I said warily. I can't build a life with someone who's still half anchored to a family that doesn't respect boundaries, he said. Every time your mom calls, you jump. Every time your dad sighs, you crumble. You say you want to choose me, but you keep choosing them in 1,000 small ways. I opened my mouth to argue. He held up a hand. Let me finish, he said. This isn't about one ceremony, it's about the rest of our lives. Holidays, kids, who has a key to our house, who gets a say. He took a deep breath. So I'm going to be very clear, he said. Either we set a hard line with your parents now, before we get married, no second ceremony, limited contact, we don't answer every call, we don't go to every event, or I can't go through with this. My stomach lurched. That's not a boundary, I said. That's an ultimatum. Sometimes ultimatums are just boundaries with consequences, he replied. Something in me recoiled at how rehearsed that sounded, like he'd read it off a relationship advice thread and decided it was wise. You're asking me to choose between you and my parents, I said slowly. I'm asking you to choose the life we want over the life they want for you, he said. If that means they get less of you, that's the cost. And if I say no? I asked, already knowing. He swallowed. Then we shouldn't get married, he said, because I'm not willing to sign up for decades of fighting your battles with them. I love you. I don't love who you become around them. The worst part? A piece of me agreed with him. Around my parents, I did become smaller, more defensive, more 16-year-old than 29. But the solution he was offering wasn't to help me grow. It was to amputate. And my feelings about your mom, I asked quietly, because she's not exactly hands-off either. His jaw tightened. What about my mom? He asked. I pulled out my phone and opened another email I'd screenshotted weeks earlier. This one was from his mother to him. You have to be firm with her, Daniel. Girls like Nina get pulled back by their families if you give them an inch. Don't let her guilt you into including those people in everything. She needs to understand that once she's your wife, our family comes first. I slid it across the counter. I found this when you left your email open, I said. I wasn't snooping. It was just there. He read it, sighed. She's just worried, he said. She's seen friends lose their sons to overbearing in-laws. So their solution is to become my overbearing in-laws instead? I asked. Replace one controlling dynamic with another? He flinched. That's not fair, he said. Neither is asking me to prove my love by cutting my parents off, I said. You say it's about boundaries, but your mom talks about those people like they're a disease I have to be cured of. He ran a hand through his hair. I can't control what my mom says, he muttered. But you can control whether you push me into her worldview, I countered. We stared at each other across the kitchen island, the gulf between us wider than it had ever been. Okay, I said finally. So this is where we are. You want me to draw a hard line with my parents before the wedding. They want me to draw a hard line with you if you disrespect them. Neither side is saying, what does Nina want? He opened his mouth, then closed it. What do you want? He asked, almost like it had just dawned on him that I might have an independent answer. For the first time, I didn't think about what would make my mom proud or my fiancé stay. I thought about 40-year-old me. Where she would live, who she would call when something good or bad happened, whether she'd be walking on eggshells in her own home. I thought about holidays spent in constant silent wars. About kids caught in the middle of, we did everything for your mother, and Your grandparents are toxic. You don't need them. What did I want? I wanted peace. Not the fake, conflict-avoiding peace I'd been raised on, where no one said anything directly but everyone simmered with resentment. Real peace. The kind that comes from living a life you're not constantly defending to other people. I want to not be a prize you and my parents are fighting over, I said slowly. I want to stop feeling like the rope in a tug of war. I want space from all of you. All of us? He repeated, stunned. Even me? If being with you means cutting them off, I said, and being with them means resenting you, then maybe the answer is neither. At least for now. His face went through about 4 emotions in 5 seconds. Anger, hurt, fear, disbelief. So you're choosing them, he said. No, I said quietly. I'm choosing me. The next 48 hours were a blur. Logistically, calling off a wedding is like executing a complicated operation with a broken heart and no sleep. Emotionally, it's like detonating a bomb in slow motion. The first thing I did was email the venue. Subject line, change of plans. They were surprisingly kind. We're sorry to hear this, the manager wrote back. We can refund 50% if you cancel by end of week or hold your credit for a future event. The future event part made me laugh in a way that wasn't funny. Daniel and I divided the task list. He called his side of the guest list. I called mine. Before I made a single call, I did something else. I booked a therapy appointment. Not for later, not when things calm down. Right then. Because it hit me with brutal clarity. I had spent my entire life reacting to other people's demands. I needed to learn, fast, how to act from my own center. Telling my parents was exactly as dramatic as you'd imagine. My mom's voice went from cheerful to devastated to furious in under a minute. You did this for him, she snapped. You chose a man over your family, and now he's left you. Mom, I'm the one who called it off, I said, for what felt like the 100th time. She scoffed. No man gives up this close to a wedding unless something is wrong with the woman, she said. What did you do? I almost told her about the ultimatum. The email. The me or them. But I knew how that would go. She'd turn it into proof that outsiders were untrustworthy, that she'd been right all along. So instead, I said, we weren't compatible. It's better to find that out now than after there are kids involved. She cried. She said things like, what will we tell people? Do you know how embarrassing this is? You're almost 30, Nina. Do you think good men grow on trees? My dad in the background muttered, we should have arranged it ourselves. I hung up feeling like I'd failed a test I never agreed to take. Then I remembered something my therapist said in our first session when I briefly explained the situation. She'd asked, what if there is no way to avoid disappointing someone here? What if your only real choice is who you are willing to disappoint? I'd said, half joking, I'd like to disappoint myself the least for once. So maybe that's where we start, she'd replied. So when my mom threw, you've disappointed us at me like a knife, I mentally ticked it off as cost already calculated. Daniel's side of the conversation was quieter, but in some ways, harder. His sister, who I was close to, texted, I heard, I'm devastated, but if he made you feel like you had to choose, I get why you left. Love you, sis. His mom sent a single, chilly message. I hope you find whatever you're looking for. My son deserves a partner who understands loyalty. I didn't reply. Calling off the wedding didn't magically make the feelings disappear. For weeks, I'd reflexively reach for my phone to text Daniel about a funny meme, a bad day at work, a random thought. Sometimes I hit send before I remembered. Most of the time, he didn't respond. Which, honestly, was fair. We needed space. The weirdest part was the silence from my parents after the initial storm. For a few weeks, my mom didn't call. My dad didn't text his usual, did you pay your credit card? Reminders. For the first time in my adult life, my phone wasn't a constant stream of family commentary. At first, it felt wrong. Like a limb had gone numb. Then, slowly, it started to feel like what I'd said I wanted. Space. In that space, I thought about a lot of things. About Daniel's better qualities. The way he helped me study for my certification exam. The way he remembered my favorite snacks when I was on my period. The way he'd get genuinely angry on my behalf when my mom said something hurtful. I also thought about the parts of him I'd ignored. How uncomfortable he got when I disagreed with him in public. How he'd sometimes say, you're overreacting when I expressed a need. How easily protection had turned into, I know what's best for you. I thought about my parents too. The sacrifices they'd made. The emotional manipulation they'd leaned on like a crutch. The way they saw my independence as a direct attack on their parenting. And in all of that thinking, a pattern emerged. I had been choosing between different versions of the same thing. People who wanted me to define myself in relation to them. Good daughter. Loyal fiancé. Grateful child. Saved partner. What I hadn't really done, ever, was get clear on, who is Nina when no one is telling her who to be? Calling off the wedding didn't answer that question overnight, but it did give me a starting point. A year after the day I should have gotten married, I didn't do anything dramatic. No anti-wedding party. No solo trip to Bali. I went to work. I went to therapy. I went to dinner with a friend. It was normal. And that, honestly, felt like the biggest win. So where did everyone end up? Daniel. We haven't spoken in months. The last meaningful interaction we had was about 6 months after the breakup, when we met for coffee to exchange the last of each other's things. He'd brought a box of my old sweatshirts, a stack of books I'd lent him, the mug that said World's Okayest Programmer that I'd bought as a joke. I gave him his college hoodie, a framed photo of us from a trip, the engagement ring. He tried to give the ring back. It's yours, he said. I chose it for you. I chose to not marry you, I said gently. I don't want a daily reminder of something that hurt us both. We talked for an hour. He admitted that, in hindsight, he'd been too quick to see my parents as the enemy. I come from a family where people don't talk about anything, he said. Your family was loud and messy. It freaked me out. I thought cleaning it up meant cutting them out. I admitted I'd leaned on him as a shield instead of learning to stand up to my parents myself. I wanted you to be the bad guy so I wouldn't have to disappoint them, I said. That wasn't fair to you. We hugged. We walked away in opposite directions. It wasn't a fairy tale closure. But it was human. My parents. Therapy helped me see something important. My parents were never going to turn into the boundary-respecting, emotionally literate people in self-help books. Waiting for that would just keep me stuck. So instead of trying to turn them into ideal parents, I worked on changing my role. I stopped answering every call. I set a weekly check-in time that worked for me. When my mom guilt-tripped me, I'd say, I'm not a bad daughter for having my own life. I won't continue this conversation if you talk to me like that. The first few times, she hung up. The next few times, she cried. Then, slowly, she adjusted. Not because she had some epiphany about boundaries, but because I stopped rewarding her old tactics. My dad never became chatty. But one day, out of nowhere, he said, You did the right thing not marrying someone who doesn't accept your whole life. Marriage is hard enough when families get along. It was his weird, sideways way of saying he approved of my choice, not necessarily of calling off the wedding, but of not shrinking myself to make it happen. We're not super close, but we're also not at war. And that middle ground is more than I thought possible. Me. This is the part I was most afraid of talking about, because it's not as flashy as I met the love of my life, or I swore off relationships forever. I did neither of those things. Kept going to therapy. Rebuilt my social circle outside of family and romantic relationships. Started a new hobby that had nothing to do with anyone else's expectations. Pottery, if you're curious, I'm terrible, and I love it. I also made myself a sort of internal vow. I will never again date someone who thinks me cutting other people out is proof of my love. It doesn't mean I won't ever go low contact with someone again. It just means that decision will be mine, ideally co-signed by a therapist, not demanded by a partner who stands to benefit from my isolation. If you've listened this far, here's the core lesson I hope you take away. Sometimes choose me or them is not a choice you have to accept. There is a third option. Choose yourself, step back from both, and rebuild a life that doesn't depend on being claimed by either side. And if someone needs you to have no one else in order to feel secure, that's not love. That's fear dressed up as protection. Ultimatums feel powerful in the moment. If you loved me, you'd pick me. If you respected us, you'd leave them. But love that needs hostages to survive is already on life support. These days, when I imagine my future, I see a partner who can sit at a table with my complicated family and hold my hand under the table when things get tense, not roll their eyes at me for still showing up. I see me saying, Mom, Dad, I love you, but I'm not going to do that without needing someone else to be my excuse. And if that future takes a little longer to arrive because I walked away from the wrong first draft, I'm okay with that. I'd rather be single and whole than partnered and split down the middle. So that's the story of how my fiancé told me I had to choose between him and my family, and how I ended up choosing myself instead. It wasn't clean. It wasn't pretty. It didn't make me a hero. It just made me honest. If you're in a situation where someone is saying, it's me or them, I want you to ask yourself, are they asking you to set healthy boundaries you actually want? Or are they asking you to become easier to control? And if your family is saying, if you loved us, you wouldn't be with them, ask yourself, are they worried about your safety? Or are they just afraid of losing their favorite version of you? You might not be able to make everyone happy, but you can decide which version of yourself you're willing to live with. Now, I'd love to hear from you. If your partner told you to choose between them and your family, what would you do? Would you try to negotiate boundaries? Walk away like I did? Or something else entirely? Tell me in the comments. I read as many as I can, and your stories help other people who might be facing their own ultimatum right now. And if you like long, calm story times about real relationships, family, and boundaries, not just heroes and villains, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story. Your support really does help us keep making these deep dive videos for you.